today we have Xavier Ballesta with us. Xavier is a senior aerodynamicist at Williams Racing, the Formula One team. We're very happy to have Xavier with us today. How are you, Xavier?
Good, good. Thank you. Very happy to be here too.
Thank you. We're very happy as well. So, Xavier, your career is very interesting, and I find particularly interesting the fact that you took the right steps at the beginning of your career path to ensure that you were positioning yourself for a position in Formula One in the medium to longer term, right? So this is something I would like you to tell us more details about today. But first of all, before we get into the details, let me ask, who is Xavier? Who are you? Where do you come from?
Well, I'm Xavier Ballesta. I was born in Barcelona and I studied in the University of Barcelona Tech. So there I developed my engineering degrees, and and since then since I was a kid, I was someone very interested in both Formula One and airplanes. Mm-hmm. So I was never sure what career path to follow, but I really liked Formula One. So I thought that aeronautics and aeronautical engineering was a path that could give me one or the other, right? Which were the two things that I really liked in life.
Right, I see. And I guess when you studied in Spain, there were this 5-year degree, which were quite common. And I presume that's one of the ones that you took, right? So in your case, was a 5-year engineering degree that you studied.
Yeah, it was a 5-degree. So in the old system that you're talking about, but it was in the format of 3+2. So I did a bachelor of 3 years in aerospace engineering, mm-hmm. and then the additional 2 years of the master. So a total of a 5-year master in engineering.
Very good. So you mentioned that you were always interested in Formula One and motorsport, as well as airplanes. Of course, you mentioned that as well. But today it's very popular for students who are interested in starting a career in the motorsports industry to get involved in Formula One, in Formula Student, sorry. Is this something that you did?
Unfortunately, aerospace engineering was a very new thing in my university. So I was the first year of aerospace engineering. Mm-hmm. Therefore, there was some talk of Formula Student, but it still was not a thing, unfortunately. So whilst I was interested in kind of looking around, I never managed to, I was there too early, so I never managed to get involved in the team. But right. Because I was interested in this, as soon as I was in my professional experience, later on, I was always interested in kind of looking back. So I did volunteer a few years as a design judge in Formula Student. So I did contribute as much as I could actually to know the students and to know the different universities that would do it. So yeah, right. I think I've done it for 4 years in a row. Not in a row, sorry. So 2 years and then another 2 years. So yeah, I would be as part of my profession, my company where I was working, which was IDIADA. I was a volunteer and I was a design judge, which I would assess the aerodynamics of the different vehicles. So yeah, I did get involved with Formula Student with that.
Very good, very interesting. I think I've been to a few Formula Student events, and definitely it's something not to be missed by anybody who's really passionate about motorsports, of course, because they're the young guns, the young talent is coming through Formula Student. So it's something definitely that has not to be missed. So after the engineering degree, you also did a master's degree in aerospace engineering.
Yeah, correct. So that was also in Barcelona Tech University, and it was the final 2 years where you get more specific and more technical in subjects like aerodynamics and those topics that I am most interested in. So yeah, you kind of specialize in the subjects that you want.
Okay. And what was your experience like? Did you feel like it was very theoretical, or it had a large practical component?
It is very theoretical. So on one, I have mixed feelings about that, because on one side, even now, I am using those theoretical skills. Mm-hmm. So it's important to have that heavy theoretical base, because it's something that you will need if you have a very technical job. However, of course, that means that when you go to the professional world, hands-on work is a bigger challenge because you have less experience with it. So yeah, I think the ideal balance would be a little bit of both. And in my case, it was heavier on the theoretical side. There was some practical point of view. There is a small wind tunnel in that university, but yeah, the practical side was very low compared to the theory.
Very good. So yeah, I think this is something that is quite interesting because I also started in Spain, and there's this, let's say, common opinion from students or people who have been coming from Spanish university system, that everybody coincides that it's a system that puts a lot of emphasis on theory, right? I don't know whether you have the same point of view.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I definitely agree. Most of my degree was theoretical and like very dense on theory. So on one side, there is this very strong theoretical side that makes it very difficult to pass through each course and like to pass the exams. So it does act as a filter because there's very strong theoretical exams where many students don't go through. So the fact that there is this strong filter definitely means that the best students make it to the end. However, like once you have created this filter, the practical experience that you get is actually rather low. So you still get a lot of deep theory in all of the concepts and through most of the master. So sometimes you do get this impression that you finish your degree and your master and you still lack this practical experience. I would agree.
Yeah, I see. Well, hopefully with the courses that we're doing, and of course your course is something that we can address. But let's talk about that later on. I am curious about your dissertation. What was the topic of the dissertation that you did?
Yeah, so at the time, I was working at an engineering company called IDIADA. So I was able to use the work that I was doing or the know-how existing in IDIADA to use that for my dissertation. So I was very lucky to be able to have that opportunity of using the hardware and the software available at IDIADA. So I did a project where I was investigating a state-of-the-art CFD simulation software. So CFD stands for computational fluid dynamics. So it is aerodynamic simulation software. And I was actually testing this new software by doing or studying simulations of road cars. And by comparing that to empirical data from wind tunnel, I could actually assess how, or even fine tune how precise that software was. So it was a very, very interesting project, actually. I was quite happy to do that. And that software is still under development, but like you learn so much by challenging different CFD software and trying to benchmark and assess what is good and bad about it. So it was very interesting.
I see. So I guess this is not a software that is available to companies to purchase. It was something that was internally developed at the company, at IDIADA?
Yeah, definitely. So it's not a big commercial software at all. It was something done with some universities from North America and IDIADA. So it was all at an internal level. And yeah, correct. It was more of an R&D development software. Yeah, it is actually commercially available, but only for specific applications. The name is actually called WorkCat, which you can Google, and it's quite an interesting solution because it does not use conventional RANs or Reynolds average number stokes, but actually it has a meshless approach. It's quite interesting.
Very good. So you mentioned IDIADA, so that's moving a little bit into your professional life already. So let's talk a little bit about the jobs that you had and the early days of your career. I was checking your LinkedIn profile, and it's just something that popped my curiosity, which is that you worked as an airport consultant.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Tell us a little bit more about that. I know it's not the focus of this conversation, but it's only to highlight how many different roles someone could feel or perform until you get to your desired job, right?
Yeah, definitely. So that happened while I was still doing my master. So an opportunity came to be an airport consultant. This is in the Barcelona airport, which was very close to my university, and the idea was to help with the design of a new runway that was being built. So that involved a bit of engineering and a lot of the electrical side of the lighting of the runway, which is quite random, like taking into account that my interest was aerodynamics. But basically what I wanted to do is, I knew that when I finished my master, all of the other students of my class would have the same master as I had. Mm-hmm. So I could only differentiate myself by having very good grades, which I was trying to do. And also I knew that any professional experience would improve my profile and like would help me differentiate myself from others. So at that time, I mean, I think that professional experience on any role is something great that really you learn from, whether it is at a management level, whether it is the administrative part of it, mm-hmm. you always learn. So yeah, that on one side. And on the other, again, I am a fan of airplanes, and that was a great chance to be very close to airplanes. I was literally, my office was inside the airport perimeter, a few hundred meters away from a runway. So I would look out the window and see airplanes landing, to the point that I was being able to know what airplane was going to land by listening to the engines, because there's so many, and it was just part of my everyday. So again, it was just the experience, learning, getting professional experience, which I knew that it would always add to my profile, especially that young, when people in a master's degree level still don't have much professional experience.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a very good advice to anybody out there. So then after some time there, like was it like about a year that you worked as an airport consultant, roughly? Yeah. Then you started working for a company called Seat Sport. So Seat is the brand, the car brand that belongs to the VW group, and manufacturing site is close to Barcelona. But tell us a little bit about what is Seat Sport, or what used to be Seat Sport back then, and also how did you find that opportunity?
Yeah, that was my first real motorsport professional experience. So it was a great experience. Basically, at that time, so we're talking about early 2007, 2008, Seat Sport was very involved in the World Touring Car Championship. So there was an opportunity through my university to those of us, so those students who were interested in car aerodynamics, to get involved in a project. Again, this was partly funded by the university and part by Seat Sport. Mm-hmm. And there was an opportunity to do this collective project of developing the external aerodynamics of the next year car, so the 2008 contender. And of course, being aerospace engineering, most people are interested in airplanes, whilst I was still very keen on motorsport. So I really insisted and really tried hard to get that position, and finally I got it. So it was my first real motorsport experience. And yeah, for 1 year I was developing particularly the front end of the car. And yeah, I learned a lot. We had to do everything. We had to set up computer cluster ourselves, program the computer cluster, install the software, learn how to use it. So we really started from scratch, and it was a great project. And in the end, in 2008, actually, Seat, that car won the World Championship. So it was a great experience to be part of.
Absolutely. It sounds like a great project to be part of, and something very innovative also at that time as well. It sounds like, I mean, CFD was something that was being used across many companies, but maybe not as developed as it is today. So it must have felt very special to be part of that group of people working for a car that ended up winning world championships. Great. So and then I have, again, looking at your LinkedIn profile, right after that comes IDIADA. And you already briefly mentioned IDIADA when we were talking about your studies, but tell us a little bit about IDIADA. What is IDIADA? Because I think some people might know IDIADA, but other people maybe from the US or North America might not be familiar with that company. So if you could give us a brief introduction of the company, and then what you did with them.
IDIADA is an engineering consultancy company, and also a big testing facility south of Barcelona. They are involved mostly in automotive projects. So typical customers will be big OEMs, like say the likes of Volkswagen, Mercedes, etc. So the engineering part of it has a simulation department, which is what I was hired for. So I started simply as a trainee when I still had not finished my master's. And I was there doing my CFD simulations and started getting involved in many different projects. I mentioned automotive, but actually there are many other different industries that we did projects of, like, for example, energy industry, where we would be doing from solar panels development and simulation to wind turbines. Another example would be some aerospace industry, but mostly it was automotive. So there I did several projects involving a 1-year development of the Seat Leon road car. So of course, being so close to Seat, Seat is a big customer of IDIADA too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, then the great thing of IDIADA is that as a young student, because I started there as a student, we did a lot of benchmarking of all of the CFD products that were in the market. That was great. I had to talk to customers and explain and recommend what CFD software was better for their needs. So it's great when you're so young and inexperienced to have such a view of all of the CFD software on the market, being able to play and use all of them, and then having a big overview of aerodynamic software. So that was a great experience.
Really interesting. I'm actually very curious to know what software possibilities were available back at the time, because obviously it's been more than 10 years since that happened, right? So and things have evolved. I don't know whether you would remember off the top of your mind what were the possibilities that you could pick at that time?
Yeah, I mean, it is not that massively different, although, of course, the capabilities of this software is now much higher. But there was definitely, of course, the two big competitors were Fluent and Star CCM at the time. There was also some competition with PowerFlow, which is quite a different approach. And then there were some smaller companies that were starting with softwares like, for example, Xflow is a good example, which is now part of a bigger company, and it was all only started at the time. So, but yeah, in the end, Fluent and Star CCM were still the two big candidates that we would offer our customers.
Very good, really interesting. So that was kind of your studies and the early days of your professional career, both going in parallel, doing projects for a few companies, and really interesting that some of them were in like airport facilities, other in motorsport with Seat Sport, and also with IDIADA in very different industries, energy, automotive, etc., as you just explained. But I think it's really good, the example of your early days, the career that you've had in the early days. You've been gaining a lot of skills that at the end of the day are very transferable to motorsports and to Formula One, right? And I think here is, after finishing with IDIADA, the big opportunity came for you that changed the course of your career. And if I'm not wrong, it was with Marussia F1. Tell us how you found that. Tell us how you found that opportunity. Did you apply for the job? Someone reached out to you, and how did things go?
Yeah, it was a long journey. So I was very interested in Formula One. To me, IDIADA was the means to the dream of working in Formula One. So I was trying to assess what I could do to be as prepared as possible to find a job in Formula One. So for more than a year, I was sending CVs to all Formula One teams. And I mean, that's not just being in your computer and sending a CV. That's calling. I did go to the UK in particular to do a few interviews. And that was for a whole year with no success. So many of the interviews, there was either no role for me, or they directly did not accept my profile. But I kept insisting and kept traveling to the UK to do these interviews. And finally, in one of them, it worked. But actually, before I was accepted by Marussia, I took a different approach. I saw that, I understood that from the interviews and the experience I got from these interviews, the fact that I was not living in the UK was a problem. Okay. Or maybe not a problem, but definitely it was an obstacle. So I decided, regardless of or not of getting a job in Formula One immediately, that I would move to the UK, find a job there, knowing that it would be easier to find a job in Formula One in a UK team. And the funny thing of this is that while I was literally driving to the airport, I got a call from Marussia to get an interview. So I had already found a job in an engineering company in the UK that was not Formula One. But at the same time, I got this interview with Marussia. So by the time I landed in the UK, I went for the interview a couple of days later and it worked out. But I already had prepared a plan B, or actually this would have been a plan C. But at least find a job in the UK, and that will make it easier to potentially jump into Formula One.
There we go. So that's another great piece of advice for everybody out there who wants to find a job in Formula One. Being in the UK is actually important because there are 7 out of the 10 Formula One competitors in the UK, and that obviously it matters, right? That's important. Very good. That's a very good anecdote, actually. I'm very happy with that one. Thank you for telling us. So, what was your role within Marussia?
It's interesting because the role I had been offered in this other engineering company in the UK was a senior aerodynamicist role because I had a few years of experience, and it was very interesting role, good responsibilities, and a good pay. Instead, Marussia was a very small team where it was all growing, so I had to accept a junior role with a lower pay and pretty much starting like if I was starting from zero because it was different industry. So of course, I still didn't hesitate, and I went directly to the Formula One job. But there I started as a junior aerodynamicist with other students who had just started from university. And then, so little by little, I progressed. And after 2 years, I was promoted to an aerodynamicist.
Very good. And was there anything that surprised you or that caught your eye? Because of course, you had experience in IDIADA and some other companies, but then Marussia, Formula One team, small team, and also new to Formula One. I presume there would have been a lot to do. Based on your previous experience, once you landed there, the first days, first weeks in the office, how did you feel? What did you feel that was surprising to you?
Well, first of all, it is overwhelming to walk around a Formula One factory, even if it's from a small team, and realizing that you're there and that you're actually working in Formula One. So the first weeks I was still pinching myself because like my dream of Formula One had come true. Now, of course, it was a very small team, so it was very surprising to see how much responsibility each employee has on the final performance on the car. In the end, I had to design my own surfaces, whilst other big teams have specific surface designers that will do that job for you. I had to do my CFD simulations myself. I had to then make sure that my wind tunnel tests and my components that I designed were manufactured. I had to then go to the wind tunnel myself with my wind tunnel components, test them myself. So in the end, you do everything, and you have a lot of responsibility, but which also involves a lot of work, right? But it is the best thing, I guess, of working in a small team, that you really can make a difference because there's simply not enough people to be able to cope with all of the workload that you have.
And do you think it's maybe, I don't know whether easier is the word that I'm looking for, but do you think you have more chances of, as a junior profile or as a recent graduate, you have more chances of finding a job in a Formula One team if the team is small and young than a team that is big and has like a lot of history in the sport and are very successful? Do you think that there's an influence there in the characteristics of the team?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. In the end, when people apply for a job, people want to be in the biggest team, the fastest team, right? So therefore, of course, the big teams will receive many more offers and many more CVs. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that then the small teams can only choose those candidates that have not been hired by the big teams. So for sure, these small teams sometimes work as what I consider a bit of an academy, right? For young professionals, and they are a good link between the starting point of university and a settled big team, right? So they are a very good link between the two. And I think that capacity of feeding young engineers, forming them, and then feeding them to the bigger teams is a role that was actually very useful, and it made the whole cycle of Formula One professionals work, definitely.
And there's something else as well, conversations that I've had with friends, Formula One engineers, that there's the paradigm of the big team versus the small team, and the differences in the tasks that you are going to be involved in. Because in the big team, it's a lot of resources, a lot of people, very structured as well, which is positive, but maybe your scope is more limited than if you compare it to a smaller team, right? Because there is less people, there's a lot to do, a lot to catch up with, and really the scope, it's unlimited. What's your experience with this situation?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, if I exaggerate the situation a little bit, that same engineer might be dedicated for 6 months to develop one fixing point or one screw of a car in a very big team. And in a small team, that same engineer might have to design a whole front wing, for example, right? So, I mean, of course, I'm exaggerating, but it's part of the truth, right? You will definitely have much more work to do and be involved in bigger parts of the car than in a very big team when, as you were saying, there will be many different departments, many different teams, and in the end, you will be doing a smaller fraction of the job, definitely, simply because there are many more employees and the structure of the company is huge.
Yeah, I see. So then, from the point of view of the challenge, the engineering challenge itself and the learning opportunities, you would say there's more opportunity for growth and development in a small team.
Yes, definitely. Especially from the point of view of getting so much responsibility at the start, right? You will not be treated as maybe overprotected or maybe consider that because you're a junior, you are just like moved to the side so that you don't bother people. Like small companies really need 100% of every employee. They are simply assets that they cannot ignore. So definitely since day one, you will be given a huge load of work to do.
Yeah, I see. So as an aerodynamicist in a team like Marussia F1, you talked about designing your own surfaces, you talked about CFD, you talked a little bit about wind tunnel testing, but it sounds to me like there's a cycle there, and I know there is a cycle, but maybe you could illustrate a little bit what this cycle looks like.
Yes, definitely. The typical job of a Formula One aerodynamicist is all based on cyclical wind tunnel projects usually. So, of course, this will vary within companies, but you could imagine that these cycles can last between 2 or 3 weeks up to 6 or 7 weeks. And this cycle usually starts with an idea or a brainstorming session where you start designing components that you think will bring aerodynamic performance to the car. So basically at downforce. Once you design these concepts, you start using CFD simulations to start to get an intuition whether these results are actually a good idea or not. And then you choose your best components that you have designed from the CFD results. And only the best you will actually send to be tested and manufactured to a wind tunnel. So again, this is not a very expensive manufacturing prototype type of components. This is simply usually plastic 3D printing of components so that we can have a fast turnaround, and then we run them in the wind tunnel. So once we are in the wind tunnel and we have chosen some of these components, if we still consider that these wind tunnel components or some of these wind tunnel components look positive and look like they still generate the downforce or the flow features that we want, then that will be the conclusion of this wind tunnel project, and that could mean that they will be manufactured to the race car.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether you find a gain in the wind tunnel or you don't, once you are at this stage, then you will start again. Whatever you have learned, you will go back to the drawing board, start a new design, whether it is an evolution of the previous one or starting from scratch, and again, you will design, then do some CFD, and then test it in the tunnel. So this is this kind of cyclical nature of this job that ends up, adding performance to the race car as soon as you find a good result.
Yeah. So in a way, it's like a production facility, right? It's like a manufacturing plant that it's creating aerodynamic performance through this development cycle, and it can never stop. Right? That's the most important thing. How long is the cycle, more or less, based on your experience? Is it a matter of weeks, months to finish the cycle and to start again with another cycle?
Yeah, it's usually the order of magnitude of a month, more or less, which is quite interesting and tight if you compare it to other industries. So, of course, I studied aeronautics, and I am aware that lead project times for an aeronautical project could be 10 years, easy. for a new airplane design. Like that's 10 years of your life doing the same component, the same airplane model, right? Then you go to automotive, where I had some experience from IDIADA, and projects come down to maybe 2, 3, 4, or up to 5 years, right? From one car model to another. Again, very long lead times. So then you get installed in this ridiculous pace of Formula One when every month, more or less, you're starting from scratch and developing new projects like crazy. So it's really one of the shortest lead times in the industry. And personally, that's what I really like of this, that it does not even get repetitive. It's so hectic.
It sounds quite intense and interesting. So let us maybe go back to the conversation of your career path, right? So we're at the point that you're working for Marussia. And how long did you work for Marussia?
A bit more than 2 years.
Bit more than 2 years. Okay. And then what happened next? Was there a change?
Yeah, so in 2014 was a great year and a horrible year for Marussia. The year started very good, where we started being like definitely reaching the targets that we wanted. Monaco 2014, we got the first points, which was up to date the best the best Formula One race that I remember. Mm-hmm. Because for such a team like us to finish 9th in Monaco was simply ridiculous. So it was the start of the year was very good, but very quickly some financial troubles started to come into the company. So then by summer of 2014, I started seeing internally that there were serious cash flow problems. So nothing was official yet, but at that point I decided to be safe, and then I started looking for a job in another Formula One team. So that was in August, and then by September, I already had an interview with Williams Formula One, and I find out they hired me just a few weeks later, and all of that started to coincide with the bigger financial troubles into Marussia. And by the month of October and November, the company had gone in administration, mm-hmm. And with the very sad news of the company closing down in November, added to the tragic news also of one of our drivers, Jules Bianchi's accident. So kind of the worst news all combined together. And that was a blow to the company until the point that by November, the company disappeared and all of my colleagues lost the job.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you did fairly well if you think about protecting your own interests. It sounds like you took the right steps and found a job at Williams. What were the main differences at the beginning between Marussia, a small team, and Williams, which is a team that, I mean, most of us know about Williams, but for those who don't know, it's one of the most well-known teams out there, having competing in Formula One since the early days. They have a huge history and heritage. What were the things that surprised you at Williams?
It was mind-blowing. Williams was, of course, at another level. In Marussia, we were customers of a lot of the components of the car. We simply bought them. Whilst at Williams, we are very proud of actually manufacturing all of the components, from the gearbox to the suspension to all of the bits of the car. So it was spectacular to be in a factory where a whole Formula One car is designed, manufactured, and assembled. And of course, as you are saying, the heritage is spectacular. You can go to the museum and see all of the Formula One cars that have been part of history, and that me as a Formula One fan was following those cars from TV, right? So it is definitely another level. And then of course, the fact that Frank Williams is there and he's very close to you. So you can talk to him about the little driver problems in the 90s and how racing was in the old days and the new days. And it's simply a mind-blowing experience to be part of a team that is Formula One history.
Yeah, and as I say, Frank Williams, team principal, he started a team, and also the best engineers and the best Formula One drivers have been driving for that team. We've got the likes of Senna and so many others that have been part of Williams, and all of a sudden now you are part of Williams as well, right? You're part of the same family, so it must be really special. And so talking about your specific role, you joined the team as an aerodynamicist as well?
Yes, exactly. So I was hired in the same role that I had in Mercia, aerodynamicist. So the role itself was not too different. But of course, the big difference was the know-how in the company because of so many years of experience. And because, of course, there were many more, the aerodynamics department was bigger. More people, more principals, and therefore, of course, there is more knowledge in the department. On the other hand, there are many more means. So I was not as limited as before in the fact of manufacturing components, or budget was not that much of a problem, right? So of course, Williams is not a budget team, but it is definitely a mid-budget team, much more than what Marussia was. So there was a very big difference in the needs of the company to develop the car, and of the size of the department meant that there is more know-how.
Good. And today you're still working at Williams?
Yes.
And the role, how has it changed since you joined? Has it evolved, or today things are more or less the same? If for everything that you've been explaining of the development cycle and your first experiences as an aerodynamicist at Marussia, have things changed massively since these early days, or are they the same?
The main philosophy of these development cycles is still similar, and that will still be the case for the future. However, the actual role that I do and the job that I do every day has changed massively since the start. And it's difficult to see from the outside, right? But when I first started, how the aerodynamics department at Williams was when I started, how it is now, is completely different. Williams, when I started, had been many years, a couple of years, third in the championship, constructors championship. So it was a very competitive car. We would do podiums every other weekend. So I joined Williams when they really were up there. And it's interesting that you do not appreciate all of the work that was behind a company that is like one weekend after the other having very decent results, right? But then, little by little, we started to drop in performance through the grid. And therefore, at some point, it was decided, right, clearly what we're doing is not right. So there was a full change in the development process and how we assess performance on the car. Now, it is interesting because when you do such a big change in the way you work, in the structure of the department, in the way you assess what good and bad is for performance, the results do not come immediately. Therefore, there is the current situation where I believe the department is working as better as it has ever been working, and yet the results on track have to come because these processes take a lot of time. So we are currently struggling to find performance on track. However, we have done so much work behind the scenes to make sure that we can quickly come up the grid.
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment, of course. So Formula One is all about innovation and continuous development and trying to improve every single minute, every single day, every single week. But unfortunately, as you were saying, Williams is not going through the best moments at this time. Also, the coronavirus crisis has had a negative impact into the team. So without giving any details, because I know there's a lot of confidential topics out there, but I was wondering, how are you living these times, and what's your opinion of how things are going?
Yeah, it has been a very difficult time for the sport in general, of course. So all Formula One teams have had a very extended shutdown period, mandatory shutdown period for almost 2 months, I believe. So there's clearly an economical stress on the sport, and therefore the smaller teams like Williams will be most affected by that. So of course there is a lot of uncertainty, but in the end, and this is something that comes along a lot with conversations with Frank Williams. He has, if you look or read about Williams' history, so many times he has been in dire trouble. Like he has had to remortgage the house to save the company so many times. He has had to get rid of all of his assets. Like he got all of his wife's properties remortgaged to get the company going. So he has been under so much trouble in the past. And of course, on the personal side, much harder situations that we can even imagine, right, with his car accident. So when you look at the big picture, and how Frank has been struggling through many years and then recovered, you can only believe that you have to keep your head up, keep working hard, and only through hard work you will make it more likely for things to get better again.
Yeah, and Williams is one of the oldest teams in the grid, over 40 years, I believe, and it's the same with any company, right? The longer you survive, the better prepared you are for a crisis. And I think this can only be a good opportunity for Williams and for anybody or any organization who's interested to enter into a sport and kind of make something positive out of this situation, because Williams is definitely a great team with the right facilities and the right people. It's just a matter of having the right financial support and opportunities. We briefly talked about coronavirus, but there's something very exciting, a very good opportunity that has come outside of coronavirus that I think is very positive. We should mention briefly that you've been involved with, which is Project Pitlane. Tell us a little bit about Project Pitlane.
Yeah, so because several teams, all Formula One teams had to shut down because of this crisis, it still meant that we had these spectacular state-of-the-art Formula One facilities, which are perfect for generating prototypes, right? And therefore, this big need of this health crisis got the British government to contact Formula One teams in the UK to see how they could help out to manufacture emergency ventilators for the natural health system hospitals. So therefore, many UK competitor teams joined together and actually made a plan to develop and reverse engineer these ventilators. And actually, there is the existing objective of manufacturing 15,000 ventilators in the next couple of weeks. So this has been a very interesting project. Not only Formula One, but other UK companies have been involved. And as soon as I heard about it, I wanted to be a part of this. So as part of Williams Formula One, I have been a volunteer doing the final testing and assembly of these ventilators. And yeah, what is great is that actually I have been in the same factory side by side with other Mercedes AMG Formula One team members. So we have been working together, sharing this great passion and this volunteering experience, even though we are like competitors in our real jobs, right? So it has been great to see competing Formula One teams working together to get these ventilators manufactured. It's been a very good experience.
It sounds like an incredible experience. And what was it that you were doing? You were in the assembly line?
No, I was, once the ventilators were fully assembled,
yeah,
I was part of the testing process to certificate that ventilator was fit and was ready to be able to be sent to a hospital. So I did a very long checklist of all sorts of testing on the machine to make sure that it was safe and that it worked as it should.
Very good, very exciting. And it's now done? You're not involved anymore, or has the project finished?
The project is still ongoing, and it will still be going for a few weeks. But my involvement has now stopped because I am now fully committed back to developing in Williams. But yeah, other Williams volunteers have replaced me, and there is still like full cover-up shifts of people still working on the project.
Very good. Really exciting. Thank you very much for getting involved in this project, because it's going to help a lot of people out there. So Xavi, thanks very much. This is incredible. You've told us about your studies. You've told us about your professional career. You work for Williams. You've been working Formula One for many years, almost a decade or a full decade.
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Just about a decade. And there's no doubt that your experience is amazing, right? And it can help a lot of people out there. And I think we're very happy to say that you're an instructor at our network in our Motorsport Academy. You've released a course in Trackside Aerodynamics, and I was hoping that maybe you could give us a little bit of a preview of what the course is and what do you explain in the course.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a great opportunity, and I'm very excited to be part of the Motorsport Academy. As I have been working in Formula One, I have acquired so much knowledge that I somehow want to like get that to move on to somebody else and get that knowledge like being sent to other people, right? So the Motorsport Academy is a great chance for me to actually explain all of these years of experience that I have. And I wanted my first course to be actually Trackside Aerodynamics, because I'm very excited to be able to explain a little bit of all of the exciting parts that I consider have in this role, right? On one side, there is the opportunity for me to explain and talk about aerodynamics. Then on the other side, there is the part of being on track, right? The exciting high pressure environment that is being in a circuit in a Formula One weekend. So I think that it is a great opportunity to talk about these two concepts in one course. So yes, I'm going to be talking about aerodynamics, trackside, and all of the involvement of being on track. And finally, of course, all of the instrumentation and all of the sensors that are used on track on a race car to actually assess aerodynamic data. So I think it is a great first course that I wanted to get involved in so that I can explain a little bit of everything.
It definitely sounds really exciting. And who's the course for, or who would you think that the course would be suited to, based on your knowledge, based on your experience as a student, as a Formula One professional as well, and now having compiled this course? Who would you suggest this kind of course is for?
Yeah, first of all, to those who have an interest in aerodynamics and in Formula One, like, for example, if you are a fan of Formula One and you see on a Friday practice the cars on TV having huge sensor arrays around, or a lot of low visualization paint, and you want to know more about it, how that data is collected, and what all of those sensors are, this is a great opportunity to know, have an in-depth understanding of what each of those instruments are used for. Then on the other hand, definitely engineers who are interested in having the Formula One and the aerodynamic foundations that they want to kickstart their careers in Formula One or in motorsport. And of course, also for professionals who want to broaden their knowledge in Formula One, in track testing, and in the aerodynamic side of motorsport.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there's any previous knowledge or any specific requirement to understand and follow everything that you will be explaining in the course?
Some knowledge in fluid dynamics is required, and this can be through education or through an interest in fluid dynamics and a little bit of like self-learning. But yeah, there is a basis of fluid dynamics expected for this course.
Okay, very good. And what would you say are the learning outcomes?
So the idea is that the students get a full understanding in the concept of aerodynamic track testing and what are the objectives of these. Then on the other side, it's important that all students will be able to identify and understand all of the types of instrumentation used, why they are used, and what data will the track aerodynamicists be looking at and deciding what brings performance to a car, to a Formula One car. And finally, not only knowing the instruments, but actually learning how to use the data coming from instrumentations. And through the use and learning of how to read aerodynamic data, students will be able to assess how to improve performance on a car.
Very good. Sounds like it's a very exciting course. I hope that people out there will be excited also to know about this course and that are going to enjoy doing this course. We're running out of time, unfortunately, because I'm really enjoying this conversation with you. But I don't want to finish this conversation without asking two questions, right? And the first one, looking back, since you started studying, also the early days of your professional career with IDIADA, SEAT Sport, what are the factors that you would say have had a big impact or have played a big role in helping you succeed in your desire to start a career in Formula One?
I have already mentioned the fact of trying to differentiate myself from other candidates. And I have also mentioned about maximizing your profile or the view of us as a candidate as much as you can. But apart from these two, in terms of attitude, I would say that it has been a lot about perseverance. I was sending CVs and I was doing interviews for more than a year. And a year is a very long time when you're actually getting a lot of flights and doing a lot of interviews. So keeping insisting, keeping believing in yourself. And of course, and I cannot deny this, there's also a factor of luck, of being in the right place at the right time. And it's very interesting. There's an anecdote. When I got my job at Williams, I met one of the principals who had actually interviewed me a few years previously for a job at Williams. And he had the interview process had not succeeded. So I spoke to him and said, what was I weak? What were my weaknesses? How could I have improved my profile to be a successful candidate, right? And very honestly, he said, to be honest, we were looking for student candidates, but in the end, we didn't open a candidature for that year. So there was simply no role to fill. And although he could be lying, many times, and I have seen this as I have done a few recruitment processes, you might find good candidates, but sometimes simply there is not a role open, and you have to wait until a role opens. When I got my job at Marussia, an aerodynamicist had just given the notice because he was leaving to another company. So that had an impact in the fact that I was hired for sure. So there was just a role open as soon as I had sent my CV. So for sure there is a part of luck and being in the right place and the right time. And everyone will have that. However, the only thing you can do is keep insisting and keeping trying, and then you can be lucky.
I had a university professor who used to tell me that the outcome for anything that you do in life has two components. One component is skill. So all your preparation, going to university and trying to know as much as possible about a specific topic. And the other component of the outcome is luck, right? And there are certain things that you can do to influence luck. Of course, it's not fully controllable, like skill, you learn it, right? You just have to study, practice, etc. But the luck component is something that's it's harder to control, but there are certain things that you can do to influence. And I think this is basically what you're saying here. You have to be perseverant, you have to insist and never give up, right? And if you continue doing this, the luck factor of the final outcome that you wish to occur finally will be there. And I would like to do a follow-up question. You might have already answered it, but I just want to ask this question, right? Because it's been 10 years since you started in Formula One, roughly 10 years. You have a lot of experience. Things might have changed, and also you might be interviewing sometimes some young students, some candidates to start at Williams. What advice would you give to a student or a young professional who really wants to start a career in Formula One?
Yeah, so similar to what I was saying, I would recommend that you try to stand out. And that can be in many ways, in education, in professional experience, in volunteering, from the point of view of extracurricular activities. On the other side, think of how you can maximize your chances. So for example, I was saying that I moved to the UK because I knew that it was more likely that, or basically I was removing obstacles to make it easier to be hired, right? On the other side, whilst I was doing all of my interviews that were not successful in Formula One, I was still enjoying my time at IDIADA. I was loving the engineering and the aerodynamic work that I was doing. So trying to not give yourself too much pressure and don't make it an all or nothing kind of situation, but actually whatever path you choose to try and get to Formula One, you never know if you will make it or not. So try to enjoy it, because if you like what you're doing, you will most likely become a better professional anyways. So again, I was enjoying the road to Formula One, and then I was lucky enough to get a job in it. And then of course I would say to keep trying about this perseverance concept and believe in yourself. Formula One engineers are not aliens or superheroes. You can be a part of a Formula One team. It's quicker than you think, and suddenly you're inside and you cannot believe it. So you can do it. You have to have self-confidence that if you work hard and you have enough skills, you can definitely make it.
That's a great way of ending this interview, I think. But I just want to summarize it, just to be clear, because you've said a lot of things, all of them really powerful. But I think you've mentioned about removing obstacles and barriers, being perseverant, insisting, also differentiating from the rest. I think nowadays is very important. Everybody has an engineering degree. Everybody has been involved in Formula Student. So you really have to stand out. And hopefully, for example, doing a course at our Motorsport Academy could be a good way of differentiating, right? If I'm a university student, I want to get into Formula One, I see this course on Trackside Aerodynamics from Xavier Ballesta, Williams Formula One Engineer. That could be a nice way of differentiating as well. And one last thing that I think you mentioned, which is don't get too obsessed, right? Because I think when you get too obsessed about things, if they don't happen, that could play against you and have a negative influence on you. So I think that's very important. Thank you very much, Xavi. I think your experience, the way you have opened up to us, definitely will help a lot of students out there and a lot of young professionals who are dreaming of starting a career in motorsports or in Formula One. You've had a very successful career at Williams, and we hope that this will continue and you will achieve a lot more success in the future. Thank you very much, Xavi.
Thank you very much, Gerard. It's been a pleasure, as usual. And I look forward to meeting many of these viewers in our Trackside Aerodynamics course.
Thank you very much, Xavi. I'm sure that people will look forward to meeting you as well. And this is the end of this interview. I really hope that you enjoyed it. There's going to be more to come, many more people that we will be interviewing, Formula One professionals, engineers like Xavi. And if you want to find out more about our courses or about what we do, visit our website, www.motorsportengineer.net. Until then, thank you very much and stay healthy.